The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Rural Development. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Follow in the footsteps of my honourable colleague from Ottawa Centre. And so I rise today about Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, and on the notice to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights that was given this morning. But first, I would like to start by addressing specific concerns about Bill C-9 that have been raised in my riding of Nipissing Timiskaming. Then, I'd like to explain why I am supporting Bill C-9 and why it's important for it to come before the House of Commons at this point in time. Now, in recent months, many citizens from my riding have contacted my office with letters, telephone calls, emails, claiming that reading, teaching, or discussing religious texts or beliefs will become hate speech under Bill C-9. They've even claimed that pastors will no longer be able to read out loud certain sections of the Bible. They've even said that religious images will not be allowed in the school their children attend, and it goes on. So first, I would like to thank the residents of Nipissing Timiskaming for reaching out and expressing themselves. I would also like to thank those that have taken the time to meet with me and to explain their views. Fortunately, for all concerned, Bill C-9 is not about limiting our ability to peacefully pray, preach, interpret scripture, or gather in community to express our religious beliefs. It's not about preventing that pastor from reading out certain sections of the Bible and so on. In fact, following the passage of Bill C-9, I know that religious services and ceremonies in my riding of Nipissing Timiskaming will continue just as they are proceeding now. And that is because the right to express our faith is fully protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Under our charter, the expression of sincerely held religious beliefs will never be a crime. What I think has made religious leaders and people in our community a bit nervous is that there is a clause now present in the criminal code that will be removed as part of the amendments that are being proposed. It's the good faith clause. This clause was enacted in 1974, and in the 55 years that it's been active, it's never been successfully used because courts have said that the defense is redundant. Sincerely held religious beliefs communicated accurately and in good faith will never constitute the promotion of hate. This good faith health clause was further rendered unnecessary, or as I say, obsolete, when in 1982 Canada approved the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. And that is why the good faith clause is being removed as part of this process of revision of the Criminal Code. It's in Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that our freedom of conscience and religion is guaranteed. It protects our right to hold, to openly declare, and manifest beliefs through worship, practice, and teaching. The Supreme Court of Canada, in its interpretation of the Charter, has long made clear that expressing sincerely held religious beliefs, even when those beliefs are very controversial, does not constitute the promotion of hate. Nonetheless, people are worried, and it's important to know that. And that's why I thank the many residents of Nipissing Timiskaming who have expressed their concern. And in turn, I'm very happy to advise that they have been heard, that you have been heard, residents of Nipissing Timiskaming. After listening to feedback from religious leaders and parishioners, people from across Canada, an amendment has been proposed to the legislation that adds a greater certainty clause, clarifying that peaceful religious expression is not captured by the legislation. This amendment further reassures people what Canadian courts have consistently recognized, that peaceful practice and expression of religion are fully protected under the Charter. And for me, this is what good governance is all about. It's about listening to citizens, it's about consultations, and then it's about improved legislation. And that is why I fully support Bill C-9. In a nutshell, for me, it's all about tackling that ugly, hate-motivated intimidation or unacceptable hate-motivated violence that we are seeing in certain Canadian communities. And to do that, the legislation introduces three measures. First, it creates a new hate crime offense to be added to existing criminal acts when it has been committed because of hatred. And so moving forward, when a criminal act, such as assault or vandalism, is committed, and it will further allow prosecution if because of hatred, there was hatred, and it will make the offense more serious. I should point out that, as my colleague has said, hatred has been defined by the Supreme Court of Canada, and it is being codified in the proposed criminal code. Second aspect of the legislation is that it targets deliberate promotion of hatred through extremist symbols that are used to spread violent ideas. At the same time, it includes clear exceptions that legitimate the use, such as education or historical discussion. The intention is not to censor discussion, but to prevent the deliberate promotion of hatred. Third, it strengthens protections for places of worship, churches, schools, community centers, by making it a criminal offense to intimidate or obstruct people from entering those places. And finally, as mentioned, it adds a for greater certainty clause that clarifies that peaceful religious expression is not captured by the legislation. And for me, this is good legislation, and it is required, and here's why. In recent years, hate crimes have more than doubled across Canada. Police services across our country are sounding the alarm. But police departments alone cannot solve the problem. They need a criminal code that has their back. A criminal code that provides clarity about what is a hate crime. A criminal code that will enable them to pursue charges and ensure that it leads to prosecution. In my province of Ontario, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police is calling for clarity and consistency in how hate crimes are defined and classified. In other words, they want Bill C-9, as do legal experts and prosecutors. And that's why I say to my colleagues, as a government, we have an obligation to give the professionals who are protecting our communities, we have an obligation to give them the tools that they need to do their job. But more so, as a government, we have an obligation to ensure that Canadians right across the land are protected from intimidation and violence because of their religious beliefs, because of their ethnicity, because of their sexual orientation, or simply because of who they are. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am closing by saying that while I realize that this is a sensitive piece of legislation, at the same time, I think it's a grave, grave error to be obstructing this legislation or distorting the facts about Bill C-9. And that's why I supported this motion, this very important motion this morning that gave notice. This will provide further opportunities for us as a government to examine the legislation, to propose amendments, and hopefully to see it carried to the Senate, where it will again be further examined and debated. I close by thanking the 30 expert witnesses that came before the Justice Committee. They provided expert opinions. And I also close by thanking the priests, the parishioners, all of the citizens of Nipissing, Timiskaming who have expressed comments. As stated, I will be voting in favor of the bill because I believe that it is ensuring the very thing that Nipissing, Timiskaming residents want, which is to live, worship, learn, and gather in our communities, as they are doing now, and continue to do so, free of fear of intimidation and violence motivated by act. Monsieur le Président, merci pour cette opportunité d'avoir apporté des commentaires.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to ask my colleague here, do you agree with or denounce the now Minister of Heritage when he stated that prosecutors should have the discretion to press charges on some passages from Leviticus and Romans?
Just before I go to the Parliamentary Secretary, when using the you, just it's through the chair, not directly to the member, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. And I sense that my colleague would like to draw me into debate. And while I agree, Mr. President, that debate in Parliament is essential, today, in the spirit of the motion that was passed this morning, for me, what's most important today is to reflect on our duties as parliamentarians. And so for me, as I look around in my riding, what I believe is most important is for parliamentarians to do their job. The question that has been posed has been answered in the committee. It has been discussed. And so for me, it's about moving forward. That's what the citizens in that riding of my colleague expect, and that's what the citizens in my riding also expect. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague's question just now is symptomatic of what we've gone through with this bill. There is disinformation here that I find extremely inappropriate. Hate speech remains hate speech no matter what, and that needs to be clear. No one is being forbidden from practicing their faith. No one is being prevented from showing their faith. But the idea is to avoid having people use their faith as an excuse, as a pretext for hate speech. What is it that could possibly cause any politician to feel that it's a good idea to spread misinformation in the political space to create anxiety? I can't understand it. Perhaps my colleague understands. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Rural Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my colleague's question. I also have the same concerns about this. In our communities, prosecutors, police officers, and legal experts are all saying they need these changes to the criminal code in order to fight hate. In my opinion, this is a balanced piece of legislation. It balances respecting the freedoms that are guaranteed by the Charter, while at the same time protecting Canadians from harassment and violence on the basis of hate. Just like my colleague, I don't understand why anyone would not support this bill.
Comments, questions et commentaires, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, just to be perfectly clear, the Conservative Party of Canada is literally sending out thousands of emails, spreading misinformation, using the issue of fear in order to raise additional money for its political party. And I would ultimately argue they have taken the position that under no circumstances are they going to allow the legislation to pass, even though a majority, that means the Liberals and other parties, have said we want to see progress. We want to see the legislation ultimately pass, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, because of the Conservatives' ongoing filibustering, the only way to get it to pass is to bring in the motion that we're debating today. So if the member could just pick up on her point or her thought, it's time for us to move forward with the legislation.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. And thank you to my colleague for this great question. As I mentioned, I was surprised by the amount of disinformation, distortion of the facts, I think is probably a better term, that came forward from my writing and that has circulated in our community, in our country. For me, the real issue here is that communities across Canada are experiencing hate incidents, and they're asking Parliament to act. And I think that is our job. What we need to remember here is that Bill C-9 is strengthening protections for Canadians, and it's respecting the rights guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. It's truly striking an incredible balance. I encourage everyone to support Bill C-9. Merci, Monsieur le Président.